Have you ever wondered why the more you try to seek validation from others, the more lost you feel? Even Keanu Reeves, with all his fame and success, has talked about how the pressure of external validation can create inner chaos. The feeling of being manipulated in relationships can drain you, but the truth is, only when you learn to step back, to detach emotionally, can you regain your true power. It's the only way to break free from toxic dynamics and restore your self-worth. Silence is not a weakness. It is a powerful tool that helps you rediscover yourself. Remember, you don't need others' approval to truly be in control of your life. If this resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and follow so you won't miss the next important lessons. In relationships, emotional detachment is one of the most powerful weapons, stronger than any argument or furious outburst. Detaching emotionally is not indifference, nor is it weakness. It is not apathy or resignation. On the contrary, it is a manifestation of inner strength and exceptional self-control. To detach emotionally means you choose to reclaim control over your life, refusing to let the actions of others disturb your inner peace. It is a refusal to let yourself be dragged into an emotional spiral that you never desired. This, of course, is not easy. Such a shift requires you to restructure deeply ingrained thought patterns. You must clearly recognize situations that once made you angry, sad, or impatient, and replace these reactions with calmness, avoiding getting swept up in emotion. You will even have to restrain yourself from explaining or justifying your actions, not seeking recognition or demanding accountability from others if they fail to meet your expectations. Detaching is not just about leaving physically. It is about withdrawing from emotional and psychological influence as well. So, what happens when you stop engaging in that emotional game? Naturally, the other person will have to face the consequences of their own actions. The man who once expected you to suffer because of his decisions will have to endure your silence. And it is this silence, devoid of explanation or response, that will confuse him, making him wonder why his words no longer hurt you, why his presence no longer affects you, why his absence no longer causes you pain. The certainty he once had about his ability to control your emotions has now vanished. This is the moment when true power shifts, not through acts of revenge or confrontation, but when you stand firm in the decision that your emotional peace is non-negotiable. When you detach emotionally, you become untouchable. Silence, in its purest form, is one of the greatest psychological strengths a person can experience. It is a void that speaks volumes, a presence that forces others to confront themselves. Silence is something many people cannot endure because it makes them feel a void, forcing them to face their own decisions without any escape. In relationships where we constantly expect communication, affirmation, and reaction from the other person, your silence, refusing to respond as they expect, holds a power greater than any words or actions. When you withdraw from their emotional game and let silence fill the space, you create a psychological uncertainty, one that the recipient cannot help but feel confused by. A man who has hurt you with neglect, manipulation, or betrayal will act within the confines of reactions he has predetermined. He expects crying, pleading, or at the very least, a strong confrontation. He anticipates that you will join in this emotional battle, because as long as you react, even negatively, it proves that he still occupies a place in your mind. But when you remain silent, when you stop providing him with what he needs to measure his influence, you create an unpredictable element, making him uncomfortable psychologically. Silence disrupts the emotional balance he hoped to achieve. It denies the conclusion he expected. When you don't respond, he is forced to confront his own thoughts, actions, and the consequences of his decisions without any confirmation from you. That gap, that lack of clarity, is something no one wants to face. It makes people begin to doubt, question things they had never considered, and in that uncertainty, they lose their sense of control. This is why interrogators use silence as a tactic to force people to confess. It's also why, in relationships, silence is feared more than an argument. When someone withdraws from a conversation and offers no emotional or verbal response, the mind of the other person spins in confusion, unsure of how to explain things. Is she angry? Is she indifferent? Has she forgotten me? The absence of an answer is more painful than harsh words, because at least words provide clarity, while silence opens up a vast space for speculation, making everything uncertain and undefinable. Psychological uncertainty is one of the most powerful tools you can use, especially in situations where others think they can control you. When you stop explaining, stop justifying, stop reacting, you strip them of the ability to control the situation. They will struggle in a state of ambiguity, trying to decipher the meaning of your silence. And in this moment, they will realize they can no longer manipulate your emotions. The realization that they can't drag you into their emotional game is pure panic. When you say nothing, when you remain silent, it is not a game, nor is it a strategy to punish someone. In fact, silence is how you reclaim your own mental power. You realize that your words, energy, and attention are valuable assets, and not everyone deserves them. By choosing silence, you send a message stronger than any argument could ever convey. You speak without uttering a word, affirming that you refuse to participate in a relationship that only drains your energy. You assert your worth by not reacting to those who expect you to beg for their attention or face their provocations. The truth is, most people expect an emotional response from you because that's what they're familiar with. They have been conditioned to believe that if they press a button, they'll get the reaction they expect, as if they are conducting an experiment with predictable results. But when that response doesn't come, when silence replaces emotion, that experiment fails. The variable changes, and the person who thought they had control suddenly feels powerless. That is the power of silence. Silence creates uncertainty, forcing people to reflect. It changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. And in that change, you regain control, not over the other person, but over yourself. When you choose silence, you're not only taking away their power over you, but you're also elevating your own self-worth. You shift the focus from the person who has hurt you to becoming the strongest version of yourself. In doing so, you've completely transformed the power dynamic in this relationship in a profound and meaningful way. Power in any relationship is not always about overt control. Sometimes it's about knowing your worth and knowing when to stop seeking validation from others to focus on yourself. We've all heard the stories of those who drown in pain because they endlessly seek recognition from those who have wronged them. But when they realize that their true worth doesn't lie in external validation, but in their own self-respect and determination, they regain control of their lives. Imagine the protagonist in a famous movie letting go of everything to stop, not reacting, only to rediscover themselves. This is the process of freeing oneself from the influence of external factors. At that moment, you're not just conquering others, you're conquering yourself. When you stop seeking validation from others and begin investing in yourself, you initiate a profound change both within yourself and in your relationships with those around you. That's when you channel your energy into growth, ambition, and inner peace instead of worrying about what others think of you. Once you start focusing on yourself, you unlock an unpredictable factor. This change makes those around you feel insecure. People are always drawn to power. This is an unshakable rule in human nature. Power doesn't just come from physical strength. It comes from intelligence, emotions, and spirit. When you stop relying on someone else's approval and instead focus on your own growth, you become a force to be reckoned with. The way you act now, instead of just affirming your worth through words, will show that your value no longer depends on whether or not others acknowledge you. And this cannot go unnoticed. Self-development is not an act of revenge, nor is it to prove anything. It's a fundamental shift in how you view life. Instead of reacting to pain with despair or self-doubt, you use those negative emotions as fuel to grow. You take your disappointments, your sadness, and transform them into strength to achieve your goals in work, health, relationships, or even academics. You start to see yourself as the hero in your own story. rather than just a supporting character in someone else's. When you elevate yourself, the first thing you'll notice is that you become less accessible. It's not that you're intentionally creating distance, but rather that you're so focused on building your life that you no longer have time for those who have hurt you. This shift creates an imbalance of power because now, instead of waiting for their attention, they'll begin to wonder why you no longer pay them the same attention as before. But the most important change is the internal one. You not only become more attractive to them, but also to everyone around you. Confidence, independence, and ambition are magnetic qualities. People who take care of themselves radiate a powerful energy that no one can deny. When you become the person whose respect isn't begged for, but earned through your actions, you'll draw the attention not only of the ones who hurt you, but also of those who recognize your true value. This change isn't just about outward appearance. It's about how you view the world. When you elevate yourself, you begin to see things more clearly. You no longer perceive a man's actions as a reflection of your own shortcomings, but as a reflection of his own limitations. The people who once caused you pain no longer have the ability to control your emotions. Your life will no longer depend on their acceptance or rejection, but on your own maturity and determination. When you begin to understand that someone's poor treatment of you is not a measure of your worth, but a reflection of their unresolved issues, you'll feel lighter and freer than ever before. This awareness will liberate you from the emotional grip they once had over you. This is a difficult process that requires discipline and patience. You'll have to resist the temptation to explain yourself, seek closure, or wait for an apology that may never come. This requires you to prioritize yourself, to commit to growth even when no one is watching. But the end result is undeniable. You'll become stronger, wiser, and entirely independent, no longer needing validation from those who once made you doubt your own worth. And here's the paradox. When you no longer need their approval, that's when they begin to crave your recognition. In relationships, power is not about control, but about the ability to walk away and still stand tall and thrive. Indifference, truly, is one of the most powerful psychological tools you can wield, even more powerful than anger or revenge. Anger, though natural, is still an emotional reaction, and it sends a signal that the other person can control your mental state. It shows that their actions matter to you, that they have the ability to influence your inner world. And in that awareness, there's a subtle yet undeniable shift of power. The person who has hurt you now knows they have an impact on your emotions. On the other hand, indifference sends a completely different message. It says that you're no longer within their reach, that their actions no longer affect your feelings. And no matter how hard they try, the power they once held over you is gone. This psychological shift not only makes them feel insecure, but also, strangely, attracts them. Why is that? Because at our core, humans crave recognition. We want to know that we matter, that our presence makes an impact. When someone reacts to us, whether positively or negatively, we feel significant. Even an argument, an antagonistic attitude, still carries an unspoken message. You matter enough for me to react. Thus, the person who hurt you expects an emotional response from you. Anger, confrontation, sadness. When you no longer react to their actions, when you face everything with calmness, indifference, and incredible self-control, it forces them to confront an uncomfortable truth. They no longer dominate your mind the way they once did. For those who have always relied on controlling or seeking validation from others, this realization is a true shock. They can't understand why you can be so unfazed by what they do, why you no longer try to meet their needs. And this doesn't mean you should suppress your emotions. Feelings of pain, disappointment, or even anger are completely natural. However, what's crucial is not allowing yourself to be consumed by them forever. What matters is learning to move through them, to experience them without letting them define you. When you begin to recognize that the mistreatment of others is a reflection of them, not you, you'll find it easier to sever the emotional connection. Indifference also reflects back on the other person. When you no longer react the way they expect you to, they're left alone with their own thoughts, and insecurities. They might try to provoke you, to see if they can still control your emotions. They may seek to capture your attention, whether overtly or subtly, hoping to reestablish a familiar dynamic where they still have power over your feelings. But when you maintain your calm, when you continue living your life as if their actions were merely a fleeting moment in the past, it disrupts their entire sense of control. They begin to wonder why their actions no longer affect you, why their words and behavior no longer provoke the same reaction. And in that confusion, they will feel a change they cannot explain. They are forced to confront the truth that they've lost something valuable: your emotional investment. True strength doesn't lie in domination or revenge, but in the ability to walk away, not just physically, but emotionally. When you do not react, when you refuse to let your emotions be manipulated, that is true power. Waiting for closure and explanation is a natural impulse, but life and relationships don't always offer answers. Sometimes the closure can only be created by you. Waiting for someone else to bring you relief only makes you dependent on them, on people who may never admit their wrongs. If you keep waiting, you will remain trapped in the past. Thus, the only way to break free is to give yourself the closure that others cannot provide. Deciding that you no longer need an explanation from someone else to understand what you've been through is true freedom. You realize that their irresponsibility or unwillingness to apologize doesn't reflect your worth. It only highlights their limitations. What's important is not allowing their silence to imprison you, not letting their lack of remorse determine your ability to move forward. This isn't just about relationships. It applies to all parts of life where you felt hurt, abandoned, or overlooked. From friendships that abruptly end, betrayals that leave you struggling, to missed opportunities with no explanation, the principle remains the same. If you don't take responsibility for your own healing process, you will unknowingly let the pain control your life as though it holds the reins. Moving forward without closure is not about denial. It's not about pretending that the pain doesn't exist or forcing yourself to suppress natural emotions. It's about fully acknowledging the pain, feeling it entirely, and then deciding that the pain will not define you. This is the choice to grow rather than to resent, to progress rather than stagnate. It's about reclaiming autonomy in a situation where you once felt powerless. One of the most liberating realizations a person can have is that you don't need anyone else to validate your experience. You don't need an apology to affirm that you've been hurt. You don't need an explanation to move forward. You don't need anyone to acknowledge your pain in order to accept that it's real. Your experience holds value simply because you've lived through it. When you understand that you don't need external validation, you take back control of your own story. People often think that closure comes from someone else righting their wrongs. But the most powerful form of closure is the one that comes from within. It's the realization that you don't need their involvement to heal. It's the decision to stop returning to the past, seeking answers that will never come. It's the choice to build a future, not letting the wounds of yesterday govern you. The strongest reaction to being hurt isn't to remain immersed in the pain, nor is it seeking revenge or demanding justice from those unwilling to give it. The ultimate, deepest response is to live well, to rise above every trial, to refuse to let the past turn you bitter and full of hatred. Moving forward without closure isn't denial, but a resilient act, a declaration of inner strength, and ultimately, it is the greatest form of liberation. People have a tendency to take familiar things for granted, thinking they will always be there. We no longer recognize the value of those around us, not because they aren't important, but because our minds are focused on new things. This is an unintentional bias in our perception. What doesn't change gradually fades into the background, while things that are missing, things that suddenly disappear, demand all of our attention. This is why your absence, when deliberately used, can have a far greater impact than your constant presence. There's an interesting psychological principle here, known as the scarcity effect. People tend to assign higher value to things that are rare, things they feel will eventually be lost. When something is easily accessible, always available, we begin to undervalue it. But when it disappears, our minds can't stop thinking about it. This happens in every area of life. We only truly appreciate our health when we begin to fall ill. We only realize the value of clean water when it becomes scarce. And in relationships, the absence of someone can have a much deeper impact than their constant presence. This is even truer when considering relationships where one feels unappreciated. When someone assumes you will always be there, always willing, always forgiving, and always present, they gradually stop seeing you for what you are. They stop acknowledging your worth, not because you lack it, but because the human mind doesn't naturally notice what remains constant. This is why stepping back, temporarily withdrawing your energy, attention, and presence can shatter the illusion of permanence. It forces the other person to face a harsh reality. You're not something that will always be around. You are not an infinite resource, and without you, everything changes. And here's something even more fascinating. Absence doesn't just highlight what's lost. It also creates space for reflection. Those who once overlooked you, took you for granted, or saw you as a given, are suddenly faced with the void you've left behind. In that silence, in that empty space, the absence creates a contrast, forcing the mind to acknowledge what had been taken for granted. In the moment of realization, regret will arise. However, the power of absence is not just in making others recognize your worth, but also in restoring your own value. When you leave a relationship where you're not appreciated, you're not just sending a message to others, but to yourself as well. You refuse to be an alternative. You refuse to be dispensable. You firmly assert that you don't need their validation to affirm your worth. And psychologically, that's one of the most powerful positions a person can achieve. It's important to note that this isn't manipulation. It's not a game, nor is it an attempt to control the emotions of others. It's about breaking a cycle where your presence is taken for granted rather than being valued. It's about recognizing when your efforts go unnoticed and having the courage to step away, not as a tactic, but as an act of self-respect. When you're always present, always giving, always there, the world around you becomes accustomed to that expectation. But the moment you step away, the moment you choose not to remain a passive part of a relationship that no longer serves you, the perception of others will shift. Your absence becomes a void, and within that void, an awakening occurs. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. In the end, the lesson we need to remember is only when you detach emotionally from unhealthy relationships do you truly reclaim your power. Don't let the recognition of others become the measure of your self-worth. Remember, silence and stillness are the keys to finding yourself again. We're eager to hear your story and the insights you've gained from this video. If you have any issues, questions, or topics you'd like us to discuss, feel free to leave your thoughts below the video. We're ready to listen and create videos that help you solve any problems in your life. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share with your friends, and leave your personal thoughts in the comments. And more importantly, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss valuable videos like this in the future. Let's grow together, learn together, and live a more meaningful life together. See you in the next video.